Claude just went dark for millions of users right after Pentagon talks and a massive AI safety revolt.
Wait, are you saying the outage is connected to the military negotiations? So we're covering what triggered this, why the API stayed up, and what this means for Claude's future?
By minute 4, you'll know exactly why this timing isn't a coincidence. Let's get into it.
Welcome to the AI Daily Podcast. Today's news at a deep dive to help you stay ahead in AI.
Today, we're diving into Anthropic's Claude reports widespread outage.
Stick around to the end for today's headlines. Let's dive right in.
So, Claude went down yesterday, and while service disruptions happen to everyone, this one's particularly interesting because of what it reveals about our growing dependence on AI infrastructure. We're talking about a complete outage that lasted several hours, affecting millions of users globally.
Yeah, I saw the reports flooding in on social media. What struck me was how many businesses were essentially paralyzed. We're not just talking about casual users asking Claude to write emails anymore.
Exactly. And here's what makes this fascinating. Anthropic has positioned itself as the reliable alternative in the AI space. They've been very deliberate about their constitutional AI approach, emphasizing safety and consistency. So when their service goes down completely, it raises some uncomfortable questions about the entire AI infrastructure landscape.
The timing couldn't be worse either, right? I mean, we just heard reports about Anthropic potentially negotiating with the Pentagon for defense contracts. That's a massive shift from their original safety-first positioning.
That's the tension point. You've got a company founded by former OpenAI executives who left specifically to focus on AI safety, now experiencing reliability issues while simultaneously exploring military applications. The optics are complicated.
How widespread was this outage? Because I've seen API failures before, but this seemed different.
This was comprehensive. API access, web interface, mobile apps, everything. Users reported getting timeout errors, 503 service unavailable responses, and in some cases, just blank screens. What's particularly telling is that Anthropic's status page initially showed all systems operational for the first hour of the outage.
Wait, their monitoring didn't catch it immediately?
That's what it looks like, and that points to a deeper infrastructure challenge. When your observability tools don't detect a customer-facing outage for an hour, you've got serious blind spots in your system.
This reminds me of the early days of cloud computing, when companies would experience these massive outages because they hadn't built proper redundancy. But we're in 2024. Shouldn't AI companies have learned these lessons?
You'd think so, but AI infrastructure is fundamentally different from traditional web services. We're talking about massive GPU clusters, complex model serving pipelines, and real-time inference at scale. The failure modes are unique and often unpredictable.
And the dependency chain is probably enormous, right? I imagine Claude's infrastructure touches everything from model weight storage to inference engines to caching layers.
Precisely. And that's what we need to unpack here. Because when you look at how businesses are integrating these AI services, we're talking about customer service bots, code assistants, content generation pipelines. A multi-hour outage isn't just inconvenient, it's potentially catastrophic for operations.
I've been thinking about this from an engineering perspective. How many companies have built critical workflows around Claude without any fallback options?
That's the million-dollar question. Coming up, we'll dig into exactly what this outage tells us about AI infrastructure maturity, why these systems are so fragile despite billions in investment, and what it means for companies betting their operations on AI services. So let's break down what actually happens when an AI service like Claude fails. This isn't like a traditional web service going down where you might lose access to your dashboard or data. We're talking about inference infrastructure that's handling millions of requests per minute.
Right, and the architecture for serving large language models is incredibly complex. You've got model sharding across multiple GPUs, dynamic batching for efficiency, caching layers for common queries.
And each of those components represents a potential failure point. From what we can piece together from user reports and API responses, this looked like a cascading failure. Initial reports showed increased latency, then partial failures, then complete unavailability.
That pattern suggests maybe a resource exhaustion scenario, like they hit some scaling limit.
Very possible. Here's what's interesting. Anthropic uses a combination of AWS and GCP for their infrastructure. They've been pretty open about using Amazon's custom AI chips, the inferentia processors, for cost-effective inference. But when you're dealing with models this large, Claude 3 Opus has hundreds of billions of parameters. You need massive parallel processing power.
And that's where things get tricky. If you're load balancing across multiple regions and one region starts failing, the traffic redistributes, potentially overwhelming the remaining capacity.
Exactly. And here's where the numbers get interesting. Based on usage estimates, Claude handles somewhere between 50 to 100 million API calls daily. That's not just chat completions. We're talking about complex multi-turn conversations, code analysis, document processing. Each request might require thousands of tokens.
The computational requirements must be staggering. What kind of redundancy would you even need for that scale?
This is where the economics of AI services become brutal. Traditional web services can scale horizontally relatively cheaply, spin up more containers, add more nodes. But with AI, each inference node might need 8 high-end GPUs. We're talking $200,000 plus per node. Building true redundancy means essentially doubling that infrastructure cost.
So they're probably running pretty close to capacity to maintain margins.
That's the trade-off every AI company faces. Anthropic has raised over $7 billion, but even with that war chest, the infrastructure costs are astronomical. Industry estimates suggest they're spending $50 to $100 million monthly on compute alone.
Monthly? That's wow.
And that brings us to the reliability question. When OpenAI had their major outage last December, they revealed they were seeing 100x growth in usage over 12 months. That kind of explosive growth makes capacity planning nearly impossible.
Plus, you can't just cache AI responses like you would with traditional content. Each query is unique. Each response has to be generated fresh.
Right, and that's where this outage becomes a wake-up call for the industry. We've got enterprises building critical workflows on top of these services without fully understanding the infrastructure limitations. I spoke with a contact at a Fortune 500 company who said their entire customer service operation went down during the Claude outage.
No fallback to human agents?
They'd reduced their human workforce by 60% after implementing Claude-powered support. The ROI looked amazing on paper, until yesterday.
This feels like the cloud concentration risk all over again. Remember when US East 1 would go down and take half the internet with it?
Perfect analogy. But there's a key difference. With AWS, you could architect for multi-region failover. With AI services, the models themselves are so large and complex that running your own failover instance isn't realistic for most companies.
What about using multiple AI providers, like failing over from Claude to GPT-4?
In theory, yes. In practice, it's incredibly complex. Different APIs, different prompt formats, different model behaviors. You'd essentially need to maintain 2 completely separate implementations.
And the results might be inconsistent enough to cause more problems than the outage itself.
Exactly, which brings us to the bigger picture. What this means for AI adoption and the infrastructure needed to make these services truly enterprise-ready. Stick around, because we need to talk about what companies should actually do to protect themselves from these failures. So, here's what engineering teams need to understand. AI service reliability is fundamentally different from traditional SaaS reliability. You can't just slap a CDN in front of it or implement simple retry logic.
What should teams actually be doing then? Because clearly hoping for 99.99% uptime isn't realistic.
First, you need to architect for degradation, not just failure. That means building systems that can gracefully fall back to reduced functionality. Maybe your AI-powered features become temporarily unavailable, but your core product keeps working.
Can you give a concrete example?
Sure. Let's say you're using Claude for code review assistance in your development pipeline. Instead of making it a blocking step, design it as an enhancement. Reviews can proceed without AI insights, but when available, they augment the human review process.
That makes sense. What about companies that have gone all in on AI for customer service?
That's trickier. You need what I call a graduated response strategy. Level 1 might be cached responses for common queries. Level 2 could be routing to a simplified rule-based system. Level 3 brings in human agents. The key is maintaining enough human capacity to handle critical issues during an outage.
What about the API integration patterns? Should teams be building abstraction layers?
Absolutely critical. Build an abstraction layer that can handle multiple providers. Yes, it's complex, but it's the only way to achieve true redundancy. Track which queries work well with which models, and build intelligent routing logic.
That sounds like a lot of engineering effort.
It is, but consider the alternative. That Fortune 500 company I mentioned, they estimated the Claude outage cost them $2.3 million in lost revenue and customer satisfaction impacts. Suddenly, investing in proper abstraction layers looks pretty reasonable.
What about monitoring? Because clearly Anthropic's own monitoring failed initially.
Never rely solely on provider status pages. Implement your own synthetic monitoring. Send test queries regularly. Measure response times. Check for quality degradation. And here's the key. Monitor your business metrics, not just technical metrics. If your conversion rates suddenly drop, that might be your first sign of an AI service issue.
Should companies be thinking about edge deployment for some AI functionality?
For certain use cases, absolutely. Smaller models running on-device or on-premise can handle basic tasks. It won't match Claude's capabilities, but it keeps critical functions running. Think of it as your emergency backup generator.
This all sounds expensive and complex. Is the ROI still there?
That's the crucial question every organization needs to answer. AI can deliver transformative benefits, but only if you account for the true total cost of ownership, including redundancy, monitoring, and fallback systems.
What should listeners do tomorrow if they're currently dependent on Claude or similar services?
3 immediate actions. First, audit every workflow that touches AI services and classify them by criticality. Second, implement basic health checks if you don't have them already. Even simple ping tests are better than nothing. Third, start documenting your prompts and expected outputs. If you need to switch providers quickly, that documentation becomes invaluable.
And longer term?
Longer term, we need to push AI providers for better SLAs, more transparent infrastructure practices, and real redundancy options. This outage should be a catalyst for the industry to mature. We went through this with cloud services a decade ago. AI services need to learn those lessons faster.
Do you think this will slow down AI adoption?
It might actually accelerate it counterintuitively. Crises drive innovation. Companies that figure out how to use AI reliably will have a massive competitive advantage. The key is being smart about implementation, not just racing to adopt the latest model.
Any final thoughts for our listeners who might be reconsidering their AI strategies after this outage?
Here's the thing. AI isn't going away. These growing pains are painful, but they're temporary. The companies that will win are those that treat AI as critical infrastructure, requiring the same rigor as their databases or payment systems. Because in 5 years, not having a robust AI strategy won't be an option. It'll be a liability. The Claude outage isn't a reason to avoid AI. It's a masterclass in why you need to do it right. Before we wrap up, let's catch up on this week's infrastructure news. There's a fascinating development from Cloudflare that could reshape how AI agents interact with the web. According to the news stack, they've introduced new Markdown support specifically designed for AI agents, highlighting a crucial shift in how we think about web infrastructure.
Markdown for AI agents? That's interesting. Are we moving away from HTML-heavy pages?
It's more about creating parallel structures. The article emphasizes intent engineering over prompt engineering, basically making the web more machine-readable while keeping it human-friendly. This could be huge for autonomous systems across the board.
Speaking of autonomous systems, Aqua Ocean just unveiled something called FleetMind, an integrated platform monitoring system for autonomous vessels, as reported by Marine News magazine.
Finally, the maritime industry has been waiting for something like this. FleetMind provides both hardware and software interfaces for managing unmanned surface vehicles. It's addressing a real gap in USV management that's been holding back adoption.
Makes sense. You can't have autonomous ships without proper monitoring systems. This could accelerate the whole autonomous shipping industry.
Now here's some drama in the AI assistant world. Claude has hit #1 on the App Store, with users apparently defecting from ChatGPT. Reddit's been buzzing about this being linked to Anthropic's stance on Pentagon contracts.
That's quite the user revolt. Are people really switching AI assistants based on defense policy positions?
It seems so. The timing suggests users are voting with their downloads, showing support for Anthropic's more cautious approach to military applications.
And Meta just dropped a bombshell. Llama 4 is here. They're calling it their first natively multimodal AI model generation.
The announcement details 3 variants: Llama 4 Scout, Maverick, and presumably more to come. What's really impressive is they're building multimodal capabilities from the ground up, not just bolting them on.
Native multimodal means these models can understand images, text, and potentially audio all in the same architecture. That's a significant leap from Llama 3.
The benchmarks they're sharing look incredibly promising, too. This could really shake up the open source AI landscape.
That wraps up today's news.
That's our show for today.
If you found this valuable, please subscribe and share with a friend who'd appreciate it.
Drop us a comment with your thoughts on today's topic.
Links to everything we discussed are in the show notes.
Until next time.